Hey, this is Morgan from Breakwater M&A, and today I'm going to share one of the tools that the most sophisticated buyers use to structure M&A transactions, and that's an earnout. So starting with what is an earnout? Basically, it's just a contingency payment. So it's a part of the purchase price that's paid on certain performance metrics being hit within a given deal. So the most common use of an earnout is when there's a valuation gap between a buyer and seller. So, like in our image here, there's a gap that we need to overcome and get to the other side of the transaction. And so, what we want to do with an earnout is structure the deal so that the buyer has downside protection in case the business does not perform as well as it maybe is done in the past, or if there's some uncertainty about regulatory bodies, what have you. And at the same time, give a little upside to the seller in the transaction. So the perfect earnout structure should actually be a bit win-win if all things go right. That being said, only 15%, yes, 1/5 of earnouts get paid out according to KPMG. So you have to know as a buyer that sellers are going to be a little bit wary about structuring an earnout in the deal. So how do you make it work? Well, what I always advise buyers is start with simplicity. Start with a straightforward offer. Even if you think that the asking price is too high, come in a bit lower with an all cash offer. If they don't take that, okay, it's time to get creative. And oftentimes what that means is taking the gap in valuation. So let's just use a simple example. Let's say the owner wanted 2 million and you are only willing to offer 1.5 million. One way to structure the deal is to put a $500,000 earnout on the business in that business transaction. And so if certain metrics are met, oftentimes as a buyer, you'll want the profit margin to get hit. So like the same profit of the past or future expected profit. As an owner, once we hand over the business to a buyer, you're probably out of control of the business and you don't want a buyer to drive up costs to make it look like your profit is lower, basically not allowing them to pay you out. So instead, what we often, the middle ground is either using revenue as a metric. So as long as the business continues to grow top line sales, the earnout will get hit. So let's just say if that business was doing 5 million a year in revenue, okay, great. We're going to structure the earnout so that as long as the business has a minimum of 5 million in revenue, or maybe there's 5 million plus a bit of a growth buffer, the remaining 500,000 will get paid out over the next 3 years, with a third getting paid out each year. That's one way to handle it. Another way to look at it is gross profit. Now, this is a bit of a better metric where, as a buyer and a seller, they each have a metric that is a little bit more comfortable. Because as a buyer, if I went in and bought a manufacturing company, for example, and my raw materials or things got way more expensive post transaction, you don't have any control over that. And so maybe even if revenue continued to grow, you would still actually be in the red because your costs have gone up. So if you tie the business to the gross profit margin staying the same over the next few years, that can be a more fair way to handle it. So those are a couple of ways to use an earnout in a deal. However, I would always lead with simplicity. Use an earnout as a valuation gap, and as a seller, I would consider it, because sometimes, in our going back to our previous example, if there's a $2 million transaction at play, then you can actually maybe negotiate a little bit higher. Maybe a buyer comes in and says, "Hey, I'm willing to pay 1.5 million, but I'll put another 750,000 as an earnout as a part of the deal." So you can actually get above your purchase price in some cases. And if your business is growing really fast, if you're confident in the future, if it's a really strong buyer that's going to be taking it over and running the business, maybe to take it to next level heights that you couldn't have done as an owner yourself, it can make sense to do an earnout, but be careful with who you offer those terms with. Again, find that fit between the buyer and yourself, and for someone who you think can actually execute and continue to run your business, maybe even better than you can. So that's an earnout. If you have more questions, reach out to our team. We're happy to chat more about this particular deal structure.